everyone. Welcome to At Home with Sally. I'm Sally Clarkson, and I have the biggest privilege in the world to be with so many friends from all over the world who join me every week to listen to my stories, inspiration, biblical encouragement, and I am just so glad that you're here today. Thanks so much for joining me. Hello, my friends. Happy Tea Time Tuesday. I look so forward, actually, every week to Tea Time Tuesday. I hope you enjoy it too, because it's kind of makes me feel like I came up with this podcast idea that makes me feel kind of like we are a community, like you are sitting with me in my living room and we are being friends. And I think about all of you so very often. And actually, in the past few quiet times this week, my morning routine, you can see a little picture of me in my living room at home, but my morning routine of sitting with a candle, with my music. There's my little bird in this picture. And actually, tea time for me is about taking time. And when I look at all that I've been working on lately, for many years, literally since I was in my mid-20s, I have come to be a person who is a firm believer in tea time mentoring, tea time discipleship, tea time friendship. And it's for me about taking time to sit with a friend or one of your children who are your friends, to carve out peaceful moments where friendships can flow, deep conversations can be shared, where the soul is enriched by the precious time that you've stolen away from the busyness of life, and where hearts are touched. So when I have my quiet times lately, I think about you and I pray for you, because you are the people that God has put into my living room, so to speak. And I pray about what should I do today. Now, many of you in the past few weeks wrote me to say how much you loved the podcast on gentleness and how much it meant to you. And so today is really a follow-up to the podcast. I needed time to ponder it and to think about it. I think that gentleness is something we all need to know that we grow in. But as I mentioned in the podcast a few weeks ago, I was actually surprised at how many different books in the Bible gentleness is talked about as a mainstay of what it means to worship God and to be like Christ. And so a follow-up today is what we're going to talk about, humility. I think that a humble heart says, I want to understand you, I want to learn from you, I want to give to you. I am in the process of becoming little by little like Jesus, and I want to approach you with the same humility and gentle heart that I have felt from him. And so we're going to talk a little bit about humility today, because, again, I think that the values of Christ and the values of our worship before God are absolutely opposite of what the values of the world are. And I think by the end of the time that we talk about this today, I'm hoping that you're really, really going to be kind of encouraged and challenged again, because we can say that we want to worship God and to know him, but if we want to do that, then we must worship him and his attributes and what he's really like and what he requires of us. And so I was interested to find out in the past few weeks, as I've been studying virtue, that gentleness and humility are beginning points to even attempt to be able to understand God and to walk in his spirit and to live by his wisdom. So anyway, we'll talk about that in a moment. But I just thought I would tell you a little bit about my Oxford week. Today we had hope that the spring might actually be coming. Every Monday I meet with Sarah, my daughter. Many of you know her and follow her, Sarah Fink Jensen, Sarah Clarkson. And I meet her and my precious 3 grandchildren at a coffee shop. They are now they're now just a little bit older, and so it is just the funnest thing in the world to meet with them. Lillian is almost 5 years old, not quite yet. Samuel just turned 3, and Lucy is moving in the direction of 2 years old. So this is quite a little crew that we waddle and hold hands and go places, Sarah and I and the kids. But we always have Sarah and I have flat whites. It's that strong, wonderful coffee here in Oxford. And they have a tiny little bit of juice shared over 3 glasses. And every week I come loaded with this magic bag, my Queenie magic bag, with a variety of coloring books, markers, watercoloring books, those little things that make the watercolors magically come to life. This week we had new sticker books, beautiful ones, and they are all at the table with a few toys and the books. They always last for a while with these books because they haven't seen them for a whole week. And it gives Sarah and me a chance to be together, to be with the kids, and to talk. And of course, we all have a little bite of something shared, and we while away the mornings together. But we either go to my house for a bit longer time together, or I also have some toys around here that they don't have at their house, but my house is pretty small. Or we go for a walk. But the past few weeks, it has been so cold. That's why we've met in a coffee shop instead of going to each other's house. It gives us a place to go to instead of being indoors all the time. But today, near my house, and I've never done this often in America, but we took a really lovely walk in this very old graveyard that is near my house, where it was so much fun because everything is threatening to bloom in the next few months. We saw little sprouts coming up in all these different places. I think in a very short period of time, we're going to see the daffodils coming up, which is a very traditionally very planted flower here in Oxford. And one of the things that we were looking for was the tiny white snowdrops. And oh, my friends, they were already blooming by the hundreds in this graveyard. And graveyards, as you know, in Europe and in the UK, are kind of right in the middle of every place because they're in churchyards, and churches are everywhere. They're in the middle of the towns because the towns grew up around them. Whereas where I live in the United States, graveyards are usually a separate place, a place that you have to drive to, go to, visit, and then you leave. But the graveyards are usually by or in the middle of a big church. And so I have, with my sweet grandchildren, walked many, many graveyards. It's just kind of a fun thing, and you're always amazed at the stories on the tombstones. And so it is kind of like having a park near my house. And there were tiny white snowdrops, and the children each screamed and yelled when they found another little patch of snowdrops, and we actually found 3 purple crocuses that were in the midst of blooming. So even though it has been very cold here today, it gives us hope. So it's really fun for me to be able to participate in life here as Queenie, the grandmother, and with my children and grandchildren. One of my kids was moving some things from one flat to another this week, and very typical us. This is life in where we live because we don't have cars and we do everything on foot. And so a tiny little drop leaf, spindle-legged table. It was beautiful, had been bought. And my sweet one said, "Will you help me carry it through the street about 3/4 of a mile from the secondhand store to the apartment?" And so we both got on either end of this. I'm telling you what, this table felt like it was made of brick. It was quite heavy. Of course, it was heavier to me than it was to her. But anyway, we each got on one end of the table, and it was just heavy enough, just big enough that it was a little bit awkward. And so, we kept changing hands and changing places, dragging this table through town, and everybody's smiling and waving, and, like, yeah, we've done that too. And we came upon this man and his wife, and they were from India, and the man said, I would like to carry that for you. So he picked up the table and he carried it for about a quarter of a mile. And come to find out, he was a pediatrician, a physician in London, and he and his wife had lived here when he was in training. And she said, I will not move away from Oxford with my two children. So anyway, we had a chance to get to know them, and then we dragged it the rest of the way, and finally got it up into her house. So this is just kind of what we do here. We walk, we drag, we visit secondhand shops, we invite people in for tea. I was going to say that one of the things that I didn't realize for many years is that sometimes tea, when you say, what are we going to have for tea, is another word for what we might in America say supper. Oftentimes tea is the evening meal. It's what you're going to have tonight to eat. And so that's another thing that we are definitely used to here. Of course, instead of cookies, people say, I have some biscuits. Biscuits are cookies. So that's just a little bit about some of the fun things I've been doing this week. But anyway, I have to tell you this. It's a terrible thing for me to tell you because it actually might be a bad habit for you, but sometimes, or most of the times, I try to bring some kind of treats or goodies for my friends at my Bible study. And so this particular week, I think I'm going to pause it a minute because I want to get the exact name of this. If you can hold on one second. Okay, I'm sitting down again. I had to get it from my cupboard to make sure. But this is a perfect thing to know about as you approach Valentine's Day. And I always, can you hear me squishing it? I always celebrated Valentine's Day with my sweet ones in many different forms. But last week I was on my way to my Bible study, and I thought, oh, I need to get something quickly. I forgot to make something today. I didn't go by a bakery. And so I went by this little, we have a lot of little stores around, kind of shopkeepers sort of stores where they're not very huge, but you can always get some little something, or milk or eggs or butter or whatever. And I found this bag. It's, you probably know this brand, at least many of you do. It's called Bon Maman, BONNE MAMAN. And I found this bag of what is called Sweethearts chocolate. And as I opened them up, these are the cutest little things in the world. I love to tell you about food. You must think I eat sweets all the time. I eat a lot of other stuff too. But anyway, these are individually wrapped hearts, chocolate-covered little cakes. And I don't know if it was just the evening or what, but when I ate one of them, it was the most delightful thing in the world. I have to really hide them from myself so I don't remember where they are, if that's possible, because they're so delicious. But anyway, Bon Maman Sweethearts chocolate. And they're individually wrapped, but they would make a fun little treat if you ever have a desire to give your children a Valentine little party or tea party or whatever. So I did want to remember to tell you that because, oh my goodness, it's really fun. Like I've told you before, I try to eat about 70% really healthy and organic and everything else, and then I really enjoy that other 30%. I actually like a lot of vegetables and stuff too, so I'm lucky to like both. But anyway, that's my cookie story. Oh, and I've been thinking about this because sometimes many of you have known me. Some of you have known me in ministry and in my conferences and in my books and in all the things I've done for up to 32 years. And so sometimes I forget to tell you the normal things that everybody else knows. But when Sarah and I put out the Life-Giving Home a few years ago, Joel said, well, I will write some music for the Life-Giving Home. And so for those of you who know that during my normal daytime time, I always have some kind of instrumental music going on in the background. I can't have music with words when I'm working because then I start thinking about their words and not my words. But anyway, for those of you who've wondered, music for the Life-Giving Home can be found on Spotify or Apple Music, anywhere you want to, and anywhere you stream your music. And it's really lovely. I listened to it this morning in my own Life-Giving Home, and it was really lots of fun because it's lovely, delightful piano music that Joel wrote just for the pleasure of my friends. So anyway, okay, so here we go, my friends. When I think about this, I want these verses to go deep in your heart like they did in mine, because I don't want to have said that I am a believer and then lived just like everybody else in the world. I feel like one of the things that drew me to Christ to begin with was that if Christ was really real, then people who knew Christ, people who knew the God who created the snowdrops and who created my precious little, very individual grandchildren, and who created the music that I love listening to and chocolate to put on top of cake. If people knew that God, the God of infinity, the God of science and creation and intellect and truth, all the things that when we stretch in those directions, we grow and we are satisfied by the growth. I thought, I feel like their lives should be different. So I want my life to grow differently. I wish it was more different. I wish I was more exceptional or more loving or more intellectually stimulating or whatever. But the more whoever you hang around with is who you're going to be like. You know that. But if you really spend time with God and ponder His thoughts, your brain will be elevated, your character will be called to its best self, your love will be deeper, you will be that person. And I just wanted to kind of spend some time challenging myself and challenging you in some real biblical foundational pieces. But first of all, I just wanted to read this verse because I think I told you about it a few minutes ago, but I'm going to start out my time today with this verse again. Take my yoke upon you. Now, a yoke, as probably most of you know, but a yoke in the days of Christ, there would be an oxen, there would be a seasoned oxen, and he would have this kind of a wooden yoke over his neck, shoulders, and he would know how to pull a cart, how to make it smooth, how to carry the load, and then they would put a younger oxen next to the older oxen so that the younger oxen would learn the appropriate way to pull a cart. So oftentimes you would see an older oxen and a younger one, think of a cow and a calf. And so when Jesus uses this metaphor, he's saying something that was their common understanding. In other words, they didn't have cars; they had these carts with the yokes upon them. So when Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me," it's like saying, "Put yourself under my carriage, and I will teach you how to lead the weight of your cart, the weight of your story." And so he says, "Take my yoke and learn from me." And this is one of the only verses in the Bible where these two words were used in such a way. He says, "For I am gentle," and we talked about gentleness a few weeks ago. When Jesus approaches people, he doesn't scream at them, he approaches them in gentleness. And but the second part is, "I am gentle and humble in heart." So learn from me, basically, is what he's saying. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and I am humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Are you looking for rest? Then learn from Jesus. He's saying, let me teach you. Let me walk with you. Let me carry the load with you and show you how to carry your own load. And it's just beautiful. And so I wanted to kind of go through some verses today that talk about humility, but I think I'm going to go through the verses first. But I wanted to start out with one of the stories. As you know, Jesus always gave stories. And I love the fact that he gave stories. And so the story I'm going to start out with today is found in Luke 18, and you can start with around 11 or 12 and then end with verse 14. But again, Jesus was teaching stories to the people that he was listening to because he wanted them to understand from their real lives this important value of humility. Now, as you know, in the days of Christ, the most prominent religious group were the Pharisees. The Pharisees were in the temple. They had many laws. They had added over 150 rules to the law of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Number, and Deuteronomy, the Pentateuch. And the people had a rule about what to do on the Sabbath and what to do in so many different ways. They probably felt like, I can never live up to all these rules. Well, I think that oftentimes, unfortunately, Christianity has become a how to do all the works religion in our lifetime. And I'm not saying that works aren't important, because James said that you will know their faith by their works. Like if someone gives to the poor, if someone loves their neighbor, if someone forgives someone 70 times 7, then Jesus said in John, you will know them by their fruit. So we are required with all of our heart to strain in the direction of Christ, but he is looking at our hearts and how our hearts are responding to him. And so he told this story, which is really interesting, Luke 18. And he talked about a Pharisee, and the Pharisees were known to be righteous and to keep all the rules and to remind you if you didn't keep all the rules. And this is what the Pharisee said. He said, I fast twice a week, and I pay tithes of all that I acquire. In other words, he said, I fast, I pay the taxes, I am righteous. Thank you that I am not like these wretched sinners. Oh, my friends, Jesus would say the same to us. We are not supposed to stand in judgment and criticism and condemnation of other people. That's what the Pharisee did, and that's exactly who Jesus was describing when he was talking to the people. But he says, but the tax collector, this sinful man who wasn't perfect, the tax collector stood at a distance, unwilling even to lift his eyes up to heaven. Instead, he beat his chest and he said, God, have mercy on me, for I am a sinner. And Jesus said, I tell you, this man, rather than the Pharisees, went home justified. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and everyone who humbles himself will be exalted. Isn't that interesting? I mean, Jesus' values, he came with no stately form or majesty that we should look upon him. It tells us in Isaiah that he was poor, that he was downhearted and brokenhearted, and that he associated with the poor. And so as we go into this whole area of humility, what I want you to understand is that Jesus told us about humility, but he also exhibited humility in every way. And can you imagine the very people that you point fingers at might be the people whose heart Jesus is seeing, who are saying, I am so broken, I am so flawed, please forgive me. The basic root of humility is the quality of having a modest, or a low view of one's importance. And so humility is basically it's freedom from pride or arrogance. It's not thinking more highly of ourselves than we do other people. Do you remember in Philippians where it says, "Don't consider yourselves more important than others"? And so Jesus over and over again tells us that he wants us to be humble. And so I just wanted to read through some of these verses today because, boy, they really convicted me. And I have to say that the older I get, the more I realize that humility is a part of maturing in Christ. And I love this. You've heard this probably many times before, but C.S. Lewis said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, like, oh, I'm a rotten person, I'll admit it, because sometimes you're bragging about how humble you are. No, humility is not thinking less of yourself or thinking poorly or more poorly of yourself than you ought, but it's thinking of yourself less. In other words, if you're really humble, you're not going to be self-absorbed. You're not going to be narcissistic that everything in life that you do relates to you. No, you're going to be thinking about other people, and you're going to be looking out for their needs, and you're going to be looking out for how you can help them and how you can bring light and life to them. And that's kind of what C.S. Lewis was saying in his description. Confucius actually said, humility is the solid foundation of all virtues. Isn't that interesting? So we're going to talk a little bit about what were some of all of these verses, because I think that it has really seeped into my soul. But the older I get, the more I realize that I am not perfect. I make mistakes, and it gives me reason to have compassion and sympathy for other people. I was about a couple of years ago, I was involved in a relationship in which I felt like someone was unjustly critical of me. Somebody who was criticizing me of attitudes I'd never had. Perhaps they were jealous or threatened, I don't know. But as I was reading in Scripture one day, I thought, you know what? What if I humbled myself before this person and told them that if I've done anything wrong, because Jesus said to humble ourselves in front of people and to have humility in our hearts. You'll see this in just a moment. But I had spent too much time thinking that it was their fault, that I had a right to be mad or whatever. But as I was having my quiet time, the Lord said, I want you to humble yourself to this person. And this is a person who's a little bit younger, a newer Christian. And, sometimes I find that young Christians or young women are more critical than older women. You know why? Not always, but a lot of times because younger women think, I will never fail. I will have my life together. And then if they live long enough, they'll go, oh no, I failed. Oh no, I did exactly, as Paul says in Romans 7, what I didn't mean to do. And so humility is something I think that grows in your heart if you're walking with the Lord, as long as you don't allow your failures to make you cynical. But so I took this person out to breakfast, and as I was talking with them, I was just really convicted by the Lord. And I said, you know what? If I have ever in my imperfect life done anything to offend you or to disappoint you or to be wrong about some of the things that I was saying, I just want you to know that I wanted to apologize. I would never intentionally want to hurt you. I would never intentionally want to do anything that might offend you. Well, I'm telling you what, as I look back now, this person kind of had a total change of heart and ended up apologizing to me if I've had any wrong opinions about you or if I've accused you in any way. But what I see is that humility and gentleness, or humility with gentleness, it doesn't cost us anything, my friends, to say I was wrong. I make mistakes. No, my house isn't perfect. No, my children aren't perfect. That's just an honest assessment. Jesus knows. He is mindful that we are but dust. But to be humble means to be modest. And I think to be humble means to think of yourself as equal to the people around you and wondering if maybe you can love them well or help them well. In other words, it's not putting yourself above people. It's looking at people with a heart of love and a heart of encouragement. It's looking to God and saying, I don't even deserve your love, as we beat our breasts and are humble before Him. So I wanted to read you some of these Bible verses because they're so pertinent. And if you meditate on them, I have found that with my teenagers, even with my little ones when they were little, but especially as they got older, when I humbled myself and said, you know what, I may not always exactly understand what you're going through, or I know I've been really busy today and maybe I wasn't sensitive to your feelings. Humility opens hearts. Humility with gentleness really opens and ministers to hearts. So I wanted to read this verse first. 1 Peter 5, verses 6 and 7. Humble yourselves. This is Peter talking. Humble yourselves then under God's mighty hand, so that He will lift you up in His own good time. Cast all your worries on the Lord, because He cares for you. That's from Peter's heart, 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7. He learned to be totally at ease with God because God had totally communicated His love to him. We know that God says He resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. Isn't that interesting? He resists. He will stand hard against you if you act in pride, hold on to pride, shake your fist. He gives grace and understanding and mercy to you when you humble yourself before Him, because that makes you teachable. How can we know that we're living in humility and ready to receive God's humble love? Humility is the ability to be without pride or arrogance. And it's the principal character that should be seen in us. In other words, when people come toward us, they should feel a welcome. An example of what Christ was like. One of the books I love that's filled with warnings about those who refuse to be humble is Proverbs. The New Testament is full of blessings for those, so I would encourage you to do your own study on this important word. But I want to read Colossians 3:12 to you. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and beloved, in other words, if you have entered into a relationship with Christ and said, I do want to know you, I want to love you, you're holy and dearly loved, it says in Colossians, clothe yourselves. In other words, put on, just like a piece of clothing, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, there's our word again, and patience. Ephesians 4, verse 2 is very, very specifically about this. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. So be completely humble and gentle, patient, bearing. That means putting up with each other. Oh my goodness, how does that apply to parenting? Can you imagine if we are humble instead of lording it over our children and saying, you weren't perfect? If we say, I'm not perfect either. I would like to walk alongside you and help you. James 4:6 says, but God gives us more grace and more grace as we grow in love and serve Him. That's why Scripture says God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. God opposes the proud. He isn't impressed with all of your perfect works. He's impressed with your humble heart. In James 4, verse 10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. If you want to know how to grow close to God, humble yourself. Say, I don't know what's going on. I'm not even always great at believing. Sometimes I blow it. But God, I want to humble myself before you and learn from your Spirit. Peter says in 1 Peter 5, verse 5, in the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to elders. Okay, if you're younger, you need to cultivate, even older women, cultivate a humble spirit. Clothe yourselves with humility toward one another. In other words, all of us need to approach one another with humility. I know you are having a hard day. I have had a lot of hard days lately. It's okay. Do not self-condemn because you are impatient. I'm impatient too sometimes. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Now we're going to go to a verse in the Old Testament that I learned a long time ago. 2 Chronicles 7, verse 14. And this is what God was saying to the very rebellious Israelites. They kept pushing away from him, not trusting him, not following his ways. But God says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. Isn't that interesting? In our world, we hear, if I can be the most powerful, get the most votes, command the most attention, have the most money, get the best position, have the biggest house. But in God's arena, he says, if you humble yourself, Lord, I am in need. Lord, I don't need the best. Lord, help me to serve you. If you seek my face and turn from your rebellious, wicked ways, self-centered ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive sin, and heal their land. God desires to heal. I'm returning just for a moment back to the New Testament. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Do you not remember all the verses that says that he who dies to himself is the one that will grow? That he who gives up his whole life, unless a grain of seed falls into the ground and dies, it remains by itself alone. But if it falls into the ground and dies, it will bear much fruit. Again, we cannot grow, we cannot be qualified in our parenting, in our marriaging, in our ministry, in our profession. We cannot really please and reflect God unless we are growing and cultivating a humble heart. Proverbs said, God mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and the oppressed. Proverbs 11, verse 2 says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs 12, verse 15 says, the way of fools seems right to fools, but the wise are the ones who listen to advice. Proverbs 15:33, wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor. Proverbs 18, verse 12, before a downfall, the heart is haughty. If you are haughty, if you think, I will never do that, I am too good for that, there will be a downfall. Because we can't be perfect, my friends. But humility comes before honor. There's so many different ways that I wanted to talk to you today about humility, and there's so many different people that I could quote, but there was a person that I have learned about and enjoyed in the past little while, and it's J.M. Barrie. James M. Barrie was a Scottish man who moved to London, became a playwright, and he wrote Peter Pan. And it's a really interesting story. I've read many different backgrounds and interviews about the man, and of course some of them differ, some of them don't. But he befriended some little boys that he met in a park, and he made up this story for them. But he made up Peter Pan for them. But he was also a Christian, and I once read that he knew, James. I'm sorry. Who was my mind's gone blank. Who was the one who ran? He was such a fast runner from Scotland, and he ended up being a missionary in China. I'll have to think of it in just a moment. But anyway, he was a friend of many Christians. He supported the China Inland Missions. He left all of his money to a children's hospital because he cared deeply for the needs of children. And this is what he said. And the movie about him, which is a kind of an interesting movie because in the days when he lived, it was a Victorian time, but there were many people who were still living immoral lives. And so he had befriended the mother of the 3 boys that he met in the park. There's a little girl and 3 boys, and eventually he ended up adopting them after both of his parents died. But the movie about this story, and it's just, as all movies are, just a partial imprint of the story, a partial reading of the story. And there are many different facets of the story that you can read about in other places. But in general, our family did enjoy the movie Finding Neverland. And it's probably for a little bit older kids, not little children, not elementary school children even. But it was just interesting for me to find out that James Barrie actually was a very strong believer eventually in his life. And this is what he said. He said, "Life is a long lesson in humility." Isn't that the truth? You go from babyhood when you're pretty confident about everything and you demand your potato chips or whatever they are. And then you move in the direction of growing, and you grow in wisdom, and then you learn to love people, and then you learn about your need for Christ because you failed so badly and you want to know his love and his forgiveness and his direction, and you become a believer at some point along the way. And then the more you grow toward this holiness, this excellence, this beauty, and you find out, oh my goodness, God isn't some kind of a ruler to lord over all the people of the world. He is a servant king. Oh my goodness, he washed feet. Oh my goodness, he gave his life up. And so this whole coming together in humility is a way that we become more like the Lord Jesus Christ. So I hope that I haven't muddled it up too much today. I hope that as you grow in gentleness, you'll also realize that gentleness comes because your humble heart says, oh, I can give you gentleness because I have needed gentleness. I can forgive you for your sinfulness because I have needed forgiveness. I can serve you because I understand what it's like to hurt inside and feel the pain of rejection. And so there they are. There's 2 qualities that I'm going to keep going over, but I will keep adding. But gentleness comes from a heart that is humble. And Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am humble and gentle of heart." Dear Heavenly Father, we're all just in the process of growing to understand you and love you more. Thank you that you can help us with your yoke, that you teach us what it's like to be like our wonderful, loving God. Help my precious friends today to ingest this knowledge, this truth, and let it become a freedom to them. Give them the ability to give up their pride and their bitterness and hatefulness towards others, and let them find a way to pursue gentleness and humility as your Holy Spirit instructs them, that they might live in the freedom of Christ that you provide us with every day. Oh Lord, we love you, and I just really am thankful for these precious ones in this arena and pray your blessing on them today. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a wonderful rest of the week, my friends. Bye-bye. I hope you've enjoyed our time together today and that you'll join me next week. Be sure to look for more inspiration on my blog at sallyclarkson.com. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.